Hello, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, no seismic testing near one of California's nuclear plants. We'll tell you why. And a new report paints a bleak picture of poverty in California, but the story is not just a matter of numbers. We'll explain.
And I'm Peggy Pico. Also ahead, what one San Diego neighborhood is doing to stop violent crime after a shooting left 2 dead and another critically wounded. Plus, new accusations of a controversial past surface as Superior Court Judge Gary Creep prepares to take his seat in January.
And after 2 decades of waiting, a celebration in Barrio Logan as it gets new affordable housing. And that's just the start of a major redevelopment project. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
California Coastal Commission has denied a permit to conduct seismic testing off the coast to see if earthquake faults threaten the Diablo nuclear plant. That's near San Luis Obispo. KPBS reporter Allison St. John monitored the meeting, and she joins us. Allison, now, haven't ratepayers been paying for seismic testing at both Diablo and San Onofre because we need to know whether earthquake faults threaten the plants?
Well, right, Dwayne. Diablo Canyon and San Onofre, north of San Diego, are the 2 nuclear power plants on California's coast. And they both have earthquake fault lines right offshore that create some concern, especially after Fukushima. And ratepayers are paying $64 million for seismic studies. That's something the State Public Utilities Commission has already approved.
So why did the California Coastal Commission vote to deny the permit to do the seismic testing?
Well, more than 150 people showed up at the meeting to protest the seismic testing because it turns out that it involves using a ship that drags an array with air guns to shoot sound waves that would reach up to 9 miles below the ocean floor. That ship, by the way, has already been brought from the East Coast to do it. But the noise from the air guns, up to 250 decibels, would cause tremendous impacts to marine life. People, like whales and dolphins, otters, and, in fact, anything that operates using sound waves under the ocean. So the commissioners all said that they don't believe the testing would actually prove 100% definitively whether the fault lines would threaten nuclear power plants. No one can ever really predict that, they said, so it isn't worth possibly wiping out the Morro Bay dolphins, for example.
Well, Allison, what does this mean for San Onofre?
Well, San Onofre is offline anyway, of course, and Edison says they're on a different timeline, but scientists at Scripps who were involved in the project had originally expected to do the testing this year. But it doesn't look like that'll happen now.
KPBS reporter Allison St. John. California's taken a major step toward implementing the Affordable Care Act. Today, a state board approved a plan for setting up a health insurance exchange. It goes to the White House on Friday. The Covered California program plans to start open enrollment in a year. There's more turmoil at San Diego's oldest and largest hospice program. Just days after a Medicare audit was revealed, 2 top executives from San Diego Hospice have resigned. Joining us with the latest developments in this story is KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg. Kenny, what's going on over there?
Well, the resignation of the chief financial officer and the chief medical officer was actually prearranged, and the public just found out about these resignations through a leaked email. So the timing of these things obviously doesn't look good, but the officials at the San Diego Hospice tell me there's absolutely no relationship between the audit and these resignations.
And what about patient care at the organization? Is that being affected at all?
No, it's not. Officials tell me even though they have been audited and they may have to give the government back millions of dollars depending on the results, that patient care is going on as expected, as normal. They're admitting new patients. So everything is status quo in terms of patient care.
KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg. A new report says California's budget deficit has dropped to $1.9 billion through the end of the next fiscal year. It was nearly $16 billion in forecast earlier this year. The nonpartisan legislative analyst also says the state's in for a surplus starting in 2014 thanks to several factors: previous budget cuts, the economic recovery, and passage of Proposition 30. The incoming chancellor of the Cal State University system says he wants to take a pay cut. Timothy White asked the CSU to reduce his pay by 10%. In a letter, he told them, despite the passage of Prop 30, there remains grave economic issues to solve. He also says, quote, as I join the faculty, staff, and students who have experienced cuts, salary freezes, and increased fees, I too must do my part. White's state salary will be reduced to $380,000 a year. The last chancellor earned over $421,000 a year. A new but so far unofficial federal standard ranks California's poverty rate the highest in the nation. The Census Bureau's new standard is called the Supplemental Poverty Measure. Official reports still use the old method of relying on income thresholds, but the new one takes other things into account, including payroll taxes, medical expenses, and the cost of living. It puts California's poverty rate at 23.5%, more than 7 points higher than the official number. The District of Columbia ranks second, followed by Florida. 1 in 6 people in San Diego County live in poverty. The community of Barrio Logan is finally seeing its vision of growth and change come to life. For 20 years now, the neighborhood beneath the Coronado Bridge has longed for a major grocery store. Today, it has a new 92-unit apartment complex with a Latino supermarket opening next month. Barrio Logan is a predominantly Latino community of working-class people whose families settled in the area as early as the 1890s. But over the decades, the neighborhood changed from primarily residential to industrial use, with the Coronado Bridge in its shadow.
This was a struggle, like a lot of the struggles that those of us who have lived here in Barrio Logan are well aware of.
David Alvarez is now a San Diego City Councilman who oversees the 8th District.
For a young person to see an investment like this in the community, I can tell you, as someone who experienced the dirt lots, this means a lot.
This 3-story complex consists of 92 apartment units reserved for people and families living on limited incomes. It took 6 years from planning to completion, with support from city officials, the mayor, and the San Diego Housing Commission. Debbie Ruane says it will remain affordable for low-income families for 99 years.
That equates to a 1-bedroom unit starting at $432 and a 3-bedroom unit starting at $573. No wonder they leased up in a day and a half.
That's right. It took about 48 hours to lease out the property to 91 families and individuals. Eileen Orozco moved from a cramped studio apartment to a spacious 3-bedroom with an awesome city view. As a single mom with 2 boys and a baby girl on the way, it's very close to her job.
Yeah, walking distance. Yes, I'm really happy.
And so are community activists like Rachel Ortiz.
The residents and businesses, everybody agreed that we need a supermarket here.
That desire began in the 1970s and will come full circle next month, when a Latino-themed supermarket opens with space for retail shops, restaurants, and a community theater. The $43 million project was developed by Chelsea Investment Corporation in partnership with the San Diego Housing Commission. San Diego could add its voice to the debate over the Supreme Court's Citizens United ruling. Today, a city council committee voted to support a constitutional amendment overturning the 2010 decision, which said political spending by corporations and unions was protected by the First Amendment. It led to the creation of super PACs and heavy spending in this year's election. Councilwoman Marty Emerald proposed the city resolution. It now goes to the full council. New ethical questions are being raised by a local journalist as Superior Court Judge Gary Creep prepares to take the bench in January. Peggy Pico finds out more about the accusations.
After Gary Creep was elected to the San Diego Superior Court in June, he shot into the national spotlight for being a leader in the birther movement, a group of believers that think President Obama was born outside of the U.S. Now, a new article by my guest, City Beat reporter Dave Moss, finds the judge has a history of controversial opinions. Dave, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Now, back in the 90s, Gary Creep was on the San Diego Human Relations Commission. What did you find out about his unusual religious take while he was on that commission?
Well, he was initially appointed to this commission by a city council member who wasn't really into the whole commission's mission. And so Gary Kriep came on as this individual who was supposed to stick up for, Christians on there, people who didn't believe in LGBT rights.
And he did.
Oh, and he did, yes. He voted against most LGBT measures on there, and the community, the LGBT community, came out en masse to protest him, as did the sort of pro-life Christian fundamentalist groups. But he spent a lot of the time on the commission pushing for investigations into satanic crimes and into anti-Christian bias. But satanic crimes was one of the big things that he looked into after over 3 different meetings.
We asked Gary Kriep to respond to your article. He said he had no comment at the time of this interview, but he did say he would read your article, so there's that. However, we did talk to him in June, and here's what he had to say about his qualifications.
There's a lot of bigoted people out there, including San Diego County Bar Association, who
said that you were not qualified.
Yeah, but they did it on the basis that you can't be pro-life and you can't oppose same-sex marriage and be a judge. That's what they told me. That's a religiously bigoted statement which will be further investigated by me, and I'm going to move forward on that.
Has he moved forward on that?
Not that I know of. I have not heard any movement on that whatsoever.
Let's talk about his qualifications. What is his history back at the commission and some other things that we'll talk about in a moment? What does that have to do with his qualifications right now?
Well, typically judges are supposed to stay out of politics, stay out of any kind of controversies, because they don't want to give the impression that they're biased or that they have any kind of agenda. In this case, he has, got 40 years of having a very vocal agenda for the sort of far right side of the Republican Party. And so that maybe creates an impression, especially with issues related to, say, LGBT people who might be coming in front of his commission, or, anything that, sort of doesn't agree with his worldview.
But more importantly, there's actually laws. There's a code of ethics that prohibits leadership in political organizations.
That is correct. The California Code of Judicial Ethics says that judicial candidates and judges cannot hold leadership or any position in political organizations that advocate for the election of candidates in non-judicial elections. He has been involved in several over the years, many, and this whole last election cycle, he was involved with at least 3 or 4 that I could find.
You spoke to him via email, I understand, for this article. What was his response when you said, hey, you're breaking this code of ethics? What did he say?
Well, I asked him, how it jived, and he said, well, I resigned from my leadership positions of these groups, and I asked him, could you show me documentation of that? Now, this is a guy who has spent the last 4 years demanding that Barack Obama hand over his birth certificate, and when Obama has, well, that's a fake one. Hand over another one. He wouldn't give me these letters of resignation. And in fact, if you go through the records with the FEC Commission, he's worked as a consultant for these groups. He's worked as a lawyer. Their office, the headquarters are rented out of his office space. He's paid for meeting expenses and travel expenses. I mean, he's clearly very involved in at least 3 or 4 different groups.
We're almost out of time, so before we have to end, I want to ask you if any of these allegations, and there was a wide variety, we've barely touched on them here, stick, and let's say he's even found to be unsatisfactory, biased, or he's broken some sort of code, what, if anything, can be done about it now that he's been elected?
The easiest thing would be to run against him in 6 years. But you can file a complaint with the commission that looks at judicial standards. There's always a recall that you could do. The legislature can impeach a judge.
And what about attorneys? They can maybe request not to have him?
Yeah, they can file what's called papering. KPBS has discussed this quite a lot, where you don't want a judge, you file a piece of paper, you get a new judge, and you can do that sort of on a one-time basis per case.
Okay, unfortunately, Dave Moss, reporter for San Diego City Beat, we are out of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jeffrey Brown. On the next News Hour, President Obama holds his first post-election news conference, plus one family's ordeal with meningitis. That's Wednesday on the PBS NewsHour.
Overall crime is trending down in San Diego, but violent crime is up, and it's affecting the southeast and mid-city communities the most. Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks takes a close look at the impact of one violent crime, a shooting in the summer in City Heights that left 2 people dead and another person critically wounded.
All the teenagers were out front one day, and 3 guys parked on the corner a block away, and they walked up in black hoodies, and they opened fire. They dropped 40 rounds. They tried to kill everybody they saw.
By all accounts, 18-year-old Rickquese McCoy was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He wasn't the shooter's intended target. He wasn't caught up in gangs. He had just made the honor roll. His murder shook the 2600 block of 44th Street. A block where kids rode bikes in circles and neighbors chatted on front lawns fell silent. Even the ice cream truck stopped coming around. Ricky McCoy Sr. is Rickquese's grandfather. He says the silence was too much to bear.
For about a week or 2, maybe even 3 weeks, nobody would even come outside anymore. And we're right across the street from an elementary school. There were no kids outside on the sidewalks riding bicycles or skateboards. It was eerie. It was nothing. It was horrible.
So McCoy and grief counselors from the San Diego Compassion Project organized a community meeting. Hundreds packed the auditorium of the elementary school to talk about their fear and the frustration of seeing another black teenager gunned down. For pent-up residents, the emotional release was the easy part. Then Counselor Dana Brown asked about solutions.
It was silent. And then an individual looked at me and said, "No one's ever asked us that before."
So residents spent the rest of the night brainstorming solutions. Ideas ranged from installing surveillance cameras to hosting a sports tournament for rival gangs. What stuck was the idea that to heal the community, they'd have to heal its individuals. They told Brown that ultimately, the tension in their community stems from poverty and a lack of resources.
There's homeless, there's dropouts, there's gangs, there's domestic violence, there's bullying, there's just about anything in the world that is painful is on this block. On the flip side, absolutely brilliant opportunities.
The meeting inspired Rickquese's grandfather to get to work. He had a sign printed at the Home Depot where he works. It reads "Neighborhood Meeting" in big block letters and hangs from the bars that surround his apartment complex.
I decided I would be, instead of being a product of my environment, that I would have my environment be a product of me. And the only way to do that is to get out there and change something. Okay, put your name on something, put your flavor out there in the world.
Each week, McCoy welcomes neighbors to the courtyard of his apartment complex. He calls it his outdoor conference room. Residents pull a hodgepodge of chairs from nearby apartments and sit down to work on getting neighbors help.
We always give out resources every Sunday.
McCoy and his neighbors pass around job listings and flyers for post-traumatic stress workshops. They talk about finding a Spanish speaker who will help them share those resources with their immigrant neighbors. Often, the conversation turns to the San Diego Police Department. Residents say they have a strained relationship with the police. Those who have lived on the block for decades say they haven't met their community officers, and many say they don't feel comfortable calling for help.
Now we have to draw the line in the sand and say, look, you guys, San Diego Police Department, need to step up and step out and get to know us. I mean, are you here to protect and serve or not?
Mid-City Police say they're listening. They're working with 44th Street residents to start a neighborhood watch, and they've even gone door-to-door with McCoy to introduce themselves. McCoy is cautiously optimistic. He says he's waiting for the officers to come around again, and he's anxious to reach more residents, especially the young ones. Already, things are changing on the block. On a recent Sunday, kids threw down their bikes to scramble for money. The ice cream truck was back.
That was Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks. We didn't hear from Rickquese's father in that story. He was a little more reluctant to speak, but eventually he did so briefly in hopes of helping others.
They said your son's been hit, but he'll be okay. And I asked, can I run the ambulance with him? That's like, no. And he ended up dying on the way to the hospital. My son is gone and I've never seen him again ever. Over some senseless violence he didn't have nothing to do with.
That was difficult to watch, and of course the impact of random violence doesn't stop at City Heights. Here to put the situation in context and how neighborhoods are taking back their community are Dana Brown with the San Diego Compassion Project and Audrey Hokoda, professor and co-leader of the Youth Violence Lab at SDSU. Thank you both for joining me. Audrey, we heard people in that story say that the way to fight violence is actually to improve the lives of individuals, especially when it comes to poverty. What does your research show about the link between poverty and violence?
Well, there's quite a link in the research between poverty and violence. These neighborhoods have a lot of desperate challenges that they're facing that include a lot of crime, gang violence, domestic violence, child abuse, immigration rights being violated.
And those are linked to poverty significantly?
Yes.
Okay. What about the link between a child witnessing a murder like this? There were witnesses to this murder who were young, either in their home, around their home. What does that do as far as the correlation to their likelihood of being more violent as they grow up?
There is a high correlation. It doesn't matter if they were the victim of violence themselves or whether they witnessed it. It often causes post-traumatic stress disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder has symptoms where they're highly aroused, they're not able to maintain or regulate when they're stressed or get more traumatized, anger control problems, problems forming healthy relationships with others, mainly because they have not felt safe. There's a lot of long-term effects.
And correlations, and we'll come back to that post-traumatic stress syndrome. But Dana, I wanted to ask you, Rickquese McCoy, the teen's grandfather, specifically reached out to Mid-City Police and said, we need your help, we need to build a relationship if we want to change our neighborhood. What are the police doing there now?
Building very strong relationships. Rick Sr. does meet regularly with Captain Jarvis of the Mid-City Police Division and Captain McManus from the gang unit at the headquarters downtown. Rick Jr. has been trained along with Kelly Shields. He's now part of our San Diego Compassion Project, and that's a training by the San Diego Police Department Crisis Intervention Team and the gang unit as well. And Officer Renee Murillo, the CRO, Community Resource Officer in Mid-City, does walk the block with Rick Sr. and Jim Clark on developing relationships. We've had officers join us on the weekly Sunday meetings.
Let's talk about Jim Clark. He lived in City Heights. He has lived there for four decades. He said that things began to change when apartment complexes began to outnumber homes. Let's hear what he has to say.
And then all of a sudden, apartments came, all the bars were put up so people couldn't get in except who lived there. Turned into a jail. And then I see all the kids now only when they go to school. And they used to talk to me when they would go to school years ago. But now they won't talk anymore. The mother says, or my daddy said, don't talk to anybody.
Now, Dana, you counsel family members who have homicides in their family through various neighborhoods throughout San Diego. Do you think Jim has a legitimate argument? Do environmental, kind of the physical environment, actually correlate with violence?
The built environment, specifically on that block, is very concrete. My understanding is there's 22 apartment complexes.
On one block?
Highly dense. Very, very dense block. Very little grass, very few trees. So the built environment is very cold and sterile. And fortunately, Swan Canyon is their backyard neighbor, so that children do have some accessibility to having some of nature around them.
What are the, I'll start with you, Dana, what's being done right now to help change the situation and improve the violence, aside from the police going along?
The residents chose, it's 100% resident-driven, resident-led, and they chose to have a neighborhood dialogue on August 12th, and over 150 people came. And we have 15 pages of strategies, of solutions, because all of this is solutions-oriented. So they have chosen, presently they're working on a neighborhood block party to try and build relationships and connections on the block. They did go to the Trauma-Informed Symposium Ricky Sr. was part of the family panel, and they're working on a neighborhood watch, which they're going to title Our Kids' Safety.
All right, so definitely, as you said, neighborhood-driven. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So Dana Brown and Audrey Hakoda, thanks so much for talking with us. And you can find out more information on our website, kppbs.org.
Recapping tonight's top stories, the State Coastal Commission has turned down a proposal for seismic testing near a nuclear plant. The project would have mapped earthquake faults near the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant near San Luis Obispo by firing air cannons offshore. Opponents of the testing said it would affect marine life. The state legislative analyst says California's budget deficit is shrinking. The newest forecast is $1.9 billion, down from nearly $16 billion earlier this year. A recovering economy, the passage of Governor Brown's tax initiative are getting the credit. Along with spending cuts, the analyst says the state could have a surplus by 2014. And a $43 million apartment project in Barrio Logan was unveiled today. It includes 92 apartments for people and families living on limited incomes. It took less than 48 hours to lease out the space, and the community's 20-year wait for a supermarket ends next month with the opening of a Latino-themed grocery store. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.